What if I told you that one of the greatest acts of deliverance in the Bible began with an anonymous woman without power, without a public voice, and without any guarantee that it would work? It sounds contradictory, but that is exactly how this biblical history begins. Before Moses confronted Pharaoh, before the sea parted, before the miracles, there was Jochebed, an ordinary woman who made extraordinary decisions when no one was watching. The Bible says very little about her in detail, and perhaps that is the point. While the world celebrates those who are seen, God often works through those who remain faithful in silence. Jochebed did not stand on stages or lead crowds, yet her choices changed the course of history. In a time marked by fear, oppression, and a decree of death, she chose to trust God when everything said she should give up. This biblical history challenges a very common belief that only influential people make a difference. Jochebed proves the opposite. She shows us that communion with God, when lived authentically, transforms the ordinary into an instrument of eternity. Her decisions were simple, yet filled with faith, and that was enough for God to write something far greater. Perhaps you have wondered whether your faith, your daily choices, or your hidden life truly matter. The Bible answers clearly. They matter more than you imagine. Small decisions made in obedience can generate impacts that cross generations. Jochebed never saw the sea part, but she was essential for that moment to happen. Throughout this journey, we will dive into the lessons of Jochebed and discover how to live a practical, deep, and genuine faith, even when the circumstances are unfavorable. This biblical history is not just inspiring, it is transformative for those who choose to live in communion with God today. Subscribe to the channel and activate notifications, because here you will learn how to live the Bible in a simple, deep, and practical way for real life. And perhaps, just like Jochebed, you will discover that God also wants to use your quiet decisions to write something eternal. The Bible presents this biblical history during one of the darkest periods of the Hebrew people. Slavery was heavy, oppression constant, and hope seemed increasingly distant. It is within this hostile setting that Jochebed appears, not as someone in a position of prominence, but as an ordinary woman facing extraordinary decisions. The narrative makes it clear that true faith is not born in comfortable environments, but in direct confrontation with injustice. The first lesson we learn from Jochebed is the courage to disobey unjust orders. When Pharaoh's decree commanded the death of Hebrew baby boys, she chose to preserve life, fully aware of the risks involved. The Bible shows that her decision was not impulsive, but grounded in values higher than human authority. This biblical history reveals that there are moments when obeying God requires standing against entire systems. This courage manifests itself quietly, far from applause or public recognition. Jochebed did not lead a protest or raise banners. She simply did what was right within her reach. The Bible teaches that faithfulness begins in secrecy, in decisions that may seem small to human eyes, but carry enormous spiritual impact. Often, the greatest act of faith is simply refusing to give in. This biblical history also makes it clear that doing what is right does not always bring immediate relief. For 3 months, Jochebed lived in constant vigilance, hiding her son and facing the daily fear of being discovered. The Bible does not soften this process, but it shows that obedience to God does not remove risk, it redefines purpose. Biblical courage does not ignore danger, it confronts it with conviction. This first lesson points to practical and relevant choices today. In contexts where pressure encourages unethical behavior, the posture of Jochebed inspires decisions aligned with the principles of the Bible. This may be reflected in refusing dishonest practices at work, preserving family values even when they are mocked, or protecting truth in environments where deception is normalized. Faith is revealed in the decision not to negotiate convictions. The second lesson we learn from Jochebed is that true faith does not surrender to despair. It moves with purpose. When it was no longer possible to hide Moses, she did not freeze in fear. The Bible records that she created a careful plan, preparing a basket with precision and strategy. This biblical history reveals a faith that thinks, plans, and acts. Jochebed's actions demonstrate that trusting God does not mean abandoning human responsibility. On the contrary, biblical faith is expressed through conscious and well-directed action. The Bible shows that she used the resources available, observed her surroundings, and acted with intelligence. Trust in God walked hand in hand with planning and discernment. This lesson applies when challenges demand more than prayer, they demand action. Biblical history teaches that active faith involves seeking solutions, organizing possibilities, and acting wisely. Like Jochebed, many situations call for creativity, strategy, and patience without losing confidence that God remains sovereign over the outcome. By combining moral courage with faith and action, Jochebed establishes a powerful foundation at the very beginning of this narrative. The Bible subtly reveals that decisions made under pressure can open unexpected paths. And it is precisely when this faith encounters unforeseen opportunities that the story begins to take new shape, preparing the ground for even more surprising movements in the next chapter. The Bible guides this biblical history to a decisive moment where silent faith begins to encounter unexpected answers. After risk, concealment, and the release into the Nile, the text reveals that God also works in the details and in seemingly casual encounters. It is within this setting that Jochebed begins to experience not only deliverance, but strategic direction, showing that mature faith knows how to read the times and discern opportunities. The third lesson we learn from Jochebed is the importance of seizing divinely provided opportunities. When Pharaoh's daughter finds the baby and is moved with compassion, the direction of the story changes completely. This biblical history makes it clear that the moment required sensitivity and swift action, because spiritual opportunities are often brief and demand a timely response. The Bible shows that Miriam's intervention was not random, but the result of a family environment prepared to act with wisdom. Jochebed had cultivated a context where discernment was valued, enabling the opportunity to be recognized and embraced. This biblical history teaches that God opens doors, but expects His servants to be attentive and ready to walk through them. It is significant that provision came from a place that once represented threat. The palace that symbolized oppression becomes an instrument of support. The Bible reveals that Jochebed not only regains her son, but is paid to care for him. This lesson shows that divine opportunities do more than resolve immediate crises. They establish foundations for purposes far greater than what is visible at the moment. The fourth lesson we learn from Jochebed is the importance of intentionally investing in the formative years. The Bible emphasizes that the time Moses remained under her care was limited, yet deeply strategic. Even knowing that he would be taken into an Egyptian environment, she treated every moment as essential to his formation. This biblical history reveals that character and faith are shaped before external influence becomes dominant. Jochebed used that season to impart values, spiritual heritage, and identity. The Bible implies that these seeds would later prove decisive, enabling Moses to recognize who he was and to whom he belonged. The biblical text suggests that what is planted early remains alive, even when circumstances attempt to erase identity. Jochebed understood that formation does not depend on the length of time, but on intentionality. This lesson reinforces that what is invested at the beginning of life produces fruit in the most critical moments of the future. By combining sensitivity to recognize opportunities with dedication to spiritual formation, Jochebed demonstrates wisdom that goes beyond immediate circumstances. The Bible prepares the reader to understand that soon, this faith would need to take on a new form, one in which trusting God would also mean learning to release what had been carefully prepared. The Bible leads this biblical history to one of the most delicate moments in Jochebed's journey. After protecting, planning, and forming, a time arrives when faith must take on a new expression: surrender. This chapter reveals that trusting God does not always mean acting. Often, it means letting go, even when the heart still wishes to hold on. The fifth lesson we learn from Jochebed is that there is a proper time to release. The Bible records that after nursing and caring for Moses, she had to entrust him fully to Pharaoh's palace. This act was not abandonment, but conscious trust. This biblical history shows that she faithfully fulfilled her role and now needed to allow God to guide what was beyond her reach. This moment teaches that mature faith recognizes its limits. Jochebed understood that no matter how much care and dedication she had invested, there would be stages of her son's life that she could not control. The Bible reveals that letting go does not mean giving up, but acknowledging that God remains present even when human supervision ends. This biblical history also highlights that this surrender involved emotional and spiritual risk. Moses would be raised in an environment with different values, foreign customs, and opposing beliefs. Still, Jochebed trusted that what had been planted would remain. The Bible teaches that true trust does not require visible guarantees, only continued faithfulness. The sixth lesson we learn from Jochebed is to trust in God's greater plan, even without understanding every detail. The Bible shows that she could never have imagined that her son, raised in the Egyptian palace, would become Israel's deliverer. This biblical history reveals that God was using seemingly contradictory circumstances to fulfill a far greater purpose. The biblical text indicates that Egyptian education, culture, and access to knowledge were part of the preparation God would later use. Jochebed did not have access to the full picture, but she trusted in God's character. The Bible reinforces that true faith does not depend on detailed explanations, but on trust in the God who governs the process. This biblical history teaches that what appears to be loss is often preparation. What leaves human hands never leaves divine control. Jochebed trusted that God was writing a story far greater than she could see, even when the path seemed confusing or distant from familiar promises. By learning to release and to trust in the greater plan, Jochebed reveals a faith that matures over time. The Bible points out that this quiet trust would sustain future choices and make room for hope to remain alive, even in seasons of prolonged pain and waiting, preparing the stage for even more challenging times ahead. The Bible continues to reveal this biblical history within a context of extreme oppression. The Hebrew people lived under forced labor, institutionalized violence, and a future that seemed completely blocked. Even so, the text makes it clear that hope had not been extinguished. It is within this harsh and prolonged environment that Jochebed remains steadfast, showing that true faith does not depend on favorable circumstances in order to endure. The seventh lesson we learn from Jochebed is the ability to maintain hope in dark times. The Bible describes a period when everything pointed toward defeat, yet there were still women and families who believed that God had not abandoned His people. This biblical history reveals that biblical hope is not naive optimism, but deep trust in the unchanging character of God. Surrounded by pain, loss, and constant fear, Jochebed did not allow external circumstances to define her faith. The Bible shows that she continued living, bearing children, nurturing, and believing. This posture teaches that perseverance is not the denial of reality, but the decision not to allow reality to erase God's promises. Hope, in this sense, becomes a form of quiet resistance. This biblical history reinforces that hope sustained over time produces inner strength. Jochebed did not witness immediate change in the oppressive system, yet she kept her trust active. The Bible points out that this perseverance was essential to endure a prolonged season of suffering without losing spiritual identity. The eighth lesson we learn from Jochebed is that a faithful life builds a legacy across generations. The Bible reveals that she was not only the mother of Moses, but also of Aaron and Miriam, three central figures in the formation and liberation of Israel. This biblical history shows that the impact of her faith extended far beyond her own personal story. The biblical text implies that the environment shaped by Jochebed was decisive in the rise of leaders with distinct yet complementary roles. The Bible presents Aaron as priest, Miriam as prophetess, and Moses as deliverer. This diversity of callings reveals that spiritual legacy is not limited to a single outcome, but unfolds in multiple ways over time. This biblical history teaches that daily choices shape the future of entire generations. Jochebed did not write laws or lead crowds, but she formed people. The Bible reinforces that the kingdom of God often advances through faithful households and consistent decisions that do not receive immediate recognition. By persevering in hope and building a quiet legacy, Jochebed shows that daily faithfulness produces lasting effects. The Bible prepares the reader to understand that this practical faith, lived over time, would still manifest in concrete, visible, and meaningful ways in the next chapter of the story. The Bible leads this biblical history to the point where faith moves beyond internal conviction and becomes concrete and visible. As we observe the journey of Jochebed, the text shows that her spirituality was never theoretical or detached from reality. Every decision she made was a direct expression of what she believed, revealing that genuine faith always finds a way to manifest itself through action. The ninth lesson we learn from Jochebed is that true faith is demonstrated through concrete actions. The Bible honors her posture by recording that she acted in faith, not merely believing, but risking herself in obedience. This biblical history makes it clear that biblical faith is not limited to words, intentions, or emotions, but is translated into practical attitudes in real situations. The biblical text shows that every step taken by Jochebed involved risk, responsibility, and conscious choice. Hiding her son, preparing the basket, placing him in the Nile, and trusting in God's intervention were actions that demanded active courage. The Bible teaches that faith which does not move remains incomplete because believing in God requires responding to what He asks. This biblical history reinforces that obedience is not always comfortable, but it is always revealing. Jochebed did not wait for ideal conditions. She acted within the possibilities available to her. The Bible points out that living faith is manifested when decisions aligned with divine principles are made, even without immediate guarantees of safety or success. The 10th lesson we learn from Jochebed is that an ordinary life can produce eternal impact. The Bible does not portray Jochebed as someone influential in the eyes of Egyptian society. She was a simple woman, a slave, without social prominence. Still, this biblical history reveals that God chose to act through her faithfulness. The biblical text makes it evident that God does not depend on status, resources, or human recognition to accomplish His purposes. Jochebed could never have imagined that her choices would affect the course of redemptive history. The Bible shows that through her came the one who would deliver Israel and serve as an instrument to reveal the law. This biblical history teaches that eternal impact begins with seemingly simple decisions made in faithfulness. Jochebed cared for what God placed in her hands at that moment. The Bible reinforces that God's extraordinary work often manifests through consistency in ordinary human obedience. By uniting active faith with daily faithfulness, Jochebed concludes this narrative as living proof that God transforms ordinary lives into instruments of eternal purpose. The Bible prepares the reader to reflect on how quiet decisions, made far from public attention, can echo far beyond time and even beyond one's own lifetime. As we walk through this biblical history, the Bible invites us to look at Jochebed not merely as a historical figure, but as a spiritual mirror. Her life was not marked by speeches, titles, or positions of prominence, but by quiet decisions made before God. Every choice revealed a heart aligned with heaven, even when everything around her pointed to fear, oppression, and loss. The journey of Jochebed reminds us that communion with God is not built in great public moments, but in daily faithfulness, often invisible to human eyes. She teaches us that turning our hearts back to God means choosing to trust when we do not understand, to obey when it is difficult, and to remain when it would be easier to give up. The Bible shows that a life lived in communion with God is never wasted, even when it seems small in the eyes of the world. This biblical history challenges us to reflect on our own choices. What kind of faith have we been living? A faith that is merely declared, or a faith that is expressed through real, practical, and consistent decisions? Jochebed challenges us to build a life where God is not a distant reference, but the very center of everything. A life of communion transforms the ordinary into an instrument of eternity. Perhaps today the invitation is simple, yet profound. Turn your heart back to God. Reorder your priorities. Restore your time of prayer, your reading of the Bible, your spiritual sensitivity. Like JOCHEBED, choose to trust even when the circumstances are unfavorable. Communion with God does not remove challenges, but it brings meaning, direction, and hope in the midst of them. If this message spoke to you, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. Here, we continue learning together, deepening our faith, and discovering how to live the Bible in a practical and transformative way each day. And now, I want to hear from you. Which lesson from JOCHEBED inspired or impressed you the most throughout this journey? Leave your answer in the comments. Your reflection may encourage others just as much as this biblical history has encouraged us.